Welcome in, everybody. It's Top 5 Tuesday here on Main Street Sports. Today, presented Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. I am a beardless David Wilson, as Calvin White managed to let me know in the green room before the show. That is Calvin White coming to you from his home up in Clarksville. We're glad to be joining you for the next 2 hours as we talk local, regional, and national sports topics, and we're glad to do it on a once sunny, now a little overcast Tuesday afternoon here in the mid-state. It's a big day for those of you that love the basketball and the hardwood. It's the first, official opener for most teams across the mid-state this year for the basketball season. Some got underway last night. We'll get into those scores here a little bit on the rundown. But the first official opener, at least for most of the Wilson County schools, and I assume for most of the Montgomery County and Robertson schools up in Calvin's neck of the woods. So we're excited for that. It's week 3 of the high school football playoffs. That means it's quarterfinals in the non-private school classifications. It is the semifinals in the private school classification. So we're excited about that as we're on the road to the Blue Cross Bowl in Chattanooga the first week of December. Calvin's still got a couple teams in the hunt trying to get to Finley Stadium at UTC. I have one in Wilson County and a couple in Murfreesboro area, in the Rutherford County area, that are going to be duking it out this weekend and try to extend their season another 6 days and get a Thanksgiving Day practice. Calvin, it's a nice day so far. How are you enjoying your Tuesday, and what's up with you?
It's good so far. It's not cold like it has been over the last couple weeks. We've been getting days of 70 degrees here and there, kind of mixed in with the near freezing temperatures. But like you said, it's always exciting to still be able to cover playoff football to this point in the playoffs. And I am one of those people that gets excited for the start of the basketball season. So
It's while you'll be
I'll
out
get
there
back
tonight, right?
I'll get basketball seasons started early tonight with a game over at Rossview tonight, and just buckle up for the rest of the football playoffs and for the next couple months of basketball.
I hate to offend anybody in the Wilson County area. You will not see David Wilson on the sidelines at a basketball game until all his respective football teams are out of the run, and we take it one forward at a time around here. For me, we'll have some photos tonight. We have James Lawson and Wilson Central tipping things off this afternoon, or I guess this evening rather. Lindsey Rutledge will be on the sidelines with the camera making things happen for that. Got some tournaments in Wilson County next week with the K Maynard Classic out at Lebanon, and Mount Juliet hosting a Thanksgiving tournament as well that I'm excited for. Got some good matchups in those as well. We got a good show for you guys on deck today. Once again, it's Top 5 Tuesday presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia here on Main Street Sports today. Final segment of the show. Last week, Calvin and Mo broke down their top 5 men's basketball players of all time. We'll talk women's side this afternoon to close out the show. We'll have our top 5 women's athletes, and there might be a smattering or two of Tennessee Lady Vols on my list, so stay tuned for that. Also, in the second hour of the show, 3 o'clock, our friend of the show, David TEEL from the VIRGINIAN-PILOT up in Virginia. Obviously, there was big news yesterday that kind of broke on this show in the 3 o'clock hour. James Franklin is now headed to Virginia Tech to be their next head football coach, replacing Brent Pry. Obviously, James Franklin, a former Vanderbilt coach, was fired just a few weeks ago at Penn State. He now finds a new home up in the DMV. We'll talk to David TEEL about all that good stuff, and we'll also talk to him about Virginia. They have an outside chance to make the ACC championship game in football and potentially earn a college football playoff berth. They're in the top 20 right now in the AP poll. We'll see where they come out tonight in the college football playoff standing. So interested to get his thoughts on the Cavaliers as well, as they're on bye this week. They're 9-2 with the aforementioned Hokies of Virginia Tech on their slate next week to close out the regular season. So we'll get his insight on all that good stuff, all things ACC football from David TEEL in that 3 o'clock segment, in that 3 o'clock hour. Coming up here on our second segment, rather, at the 2:20 mark, Bob Belvin, OVC sports commentator, will help us break down the upcoming OVC/Big South championship matchup this weekend out in Putnam County between the UT Martin Skyhawks and head coach Jason Simpson and the Tennessee Tech Golden Eagles, who are fresh off their first loss of the season up in Lexington against the Kentucky Wildcats. They are a really good team. They're obviously in the top 10 of the FCS poll. Austin P also in the FCS Nation top 25 poll. Calvin will have some questions for Belvin as well. So we got a really good show on deck for you guys. Without further ado, let's jump right into it with yesterday's results and today's lengthy schedule on the rundown.
This is the Rundown.
Last night's scores across the girls basketball ranks in the Tito Soleil. We'll kick things off with Coffee County 82-33 victors over Greenbrier. It was Franklin Christian defeating Battle Creek 54-43. It was Valor Collegiate 74, Lee Academy 24. Out in Nashville was Merrill Hyde 63, St. Cecilia Academy 24. It was Summit picking up a 51-13 win over Fairview. It was Creekwood downing Sycamore 47-35. It was Watertown picking up a 42-19 win over Red Bowling Springs to get their first win of the year. It was Beach knocking off Westmoreland last night. Final score between a Sumner County showdown, Beach 37, Westmoreland 34. In boys basketball last night, Calvin and I talked about this one a little bit on the phone earlier today. It was Bartlett picking up a 94-47 win over Rossview to start their season. It was Coffee County in the second end of a doubleheader, defeating Greenbrier 75-36. In the second end of a doubleheader was Franklin Christian 72, Battle Creek 48. Lead Academy defeated Valor Collegiate in the boys game last night 64-44. It was McCauley defeating the Tennessee Heat 52-48. It was Station Camp all over Glencliff last night. Running clock there, 73-9 was your final score. It was Summit's boys defeating Fairview 70-46. Creekwood edging past Sycamore in the boys game of the doubleheader, 69-66 final score there. Then Westmoreland defeating Hunters Lane last night in boys action, 56-48. In college basketball, on the men's side, out in East Tennessee at the Food City Center, it was Tennessee picking up a 91-66 win over Rice to move to 4-0 on their season. In an NFL last night, Monday Night Football in Sin City, it was the Dallas Cowboys picking up a 33-16 win over the Las Vegas Raiders.
Tonight's high school basketball schedule, all of these games are double headers with boys and girls games. Good Pasture is at CPA. Lebanon is at Cannon County. Clarksville hosting Mount Juliet. Todd County Central out of Kentucky travels to Clarksville Academy. Siegel is at Columbia. Riverside Christian is at Columbia Academy. Culioca is hosting Forest. BGA is at DCA. Murfreesboro Central Magnet travels to Eagleville. Houston County is at East Hickman. Cheatham County travels to Fairview. Franklin hosts Green Hill. Giles County hosts Page. Ezel Harding is at Harpeth. Rockvale is at Independence. Pope John Paul II is at Lead Academy. Lawrence County is hosting Colbert County out of Alabama. Clarksville Northeast travels to Liberty Creek. Lipscomb Academy is hosting the Webb School. Notre Dame is at Middle Tennessee Christian. Stewart County is at Montgomery Central. Nolensville hosting Hendersonville. Oakland hosting Tullahoma. Cornersville travels to Santa Fe. Centennial is at Smyrna. Springfield hosting Sycamore. Summit hosting Riverdale. Antioch is at the University School of Nashville. Dixon County travels over to Waverly. White House Heritage is hosting Greenbrier. And Wilson Central is hosting Lawson. All of those girls' games will get started at 6 p.m.
And I would assume most of those are double headers as well. Girls basketball action continued. This is just a single girls game here. Harpeth Hall at Blackman. That is a 6 o'clock first tip. Another single girls action. St. Cecilia Academy at Brentwood Academy. 6 o'clock p.m. tip there. It's Upperman at Brentwood, also at 6 o'clock. Franklin Christian at Davidson Academy. Station Camp at Macon County and Battle Creek at Marshall County. All those girls contests, 6 p.m. start times. Boys basketball, 6 p.m. start time for the following. Agos Classical at Hampshire. That's a 6 o'clock tip. 6:30, it's River Christian Academy taking on the Watertown Purple Tigers. Calvin's alma mater at 6:30 for the boys contest. That is a single right there. It's Marshall County at Battle Creek, 7:30 on the boys tip. It's Stewart's Creek at Grace Christian Franklin, 7:30 on the boys side. There is a girls game there as well at 6 o'clock. Republic at Macon County, 7:30, and Kirkwood at Providence Christian, also a 7:30 tip there. In women's basketball action tonight, it's Fisk making the trip out to West Tennessee to take on Bethel at 5:30. It's Cumberland making the trip up to Indiana Southeast. That is a 5 p.m. tip-off up there in the great state of Indiana. Men's basketball action tonight. In Kentucky, it's Cumberland at Brescia. That is a 6 p.m. tip. Tonight on the SEC Network Plus is Austin Peay making the trip down to the Grove to take on the Ole Miss Rebels. 7 p.m. tip there. And then tonight in the NBA, down at the Alamo in San Antonio, it's the Memphis Grizzlies taking on my San Antonio Spurs. 7 p.m. tip there from the great state of Texas. You can find that one on NBC and Peacock. Ladies and gentlemen, those were your scores. That was your schedule, and that concludes today's rundown. Your top story brought to you by the good folks at Piggly Wiggly and Neely's Mill in Columbia. They're open from 11 a.m. until 6 p.m. Be sure to stop by and check out their delicious daily lunch options. They also offer hand-cut meats, and everything is cost plus 10% at the cash register. Piggly Wiggly, Neely's Mill in Columbia. Presenting you our top story. And once again, this news broke yesterday around the 3 o'clock hour on this show. I know that Wade and Mo got into it a little bit, and we'll get into it a little bit more with our friend David Teal in the 3 o'clock hour in that first segment of the show in the second hour. But Virginia has kicked off, I guess, the coaching carousel with a hire, as they were one of the first ones to fire head coaches. Well, they have named former Vanderbilt head coach and Penn State head coach James Franklin as the replacement to Brent Pry, who they fired earlier this season after an 0-3 start. Franklin spent 12 seasons at Penn State, and the Nittany Lions never finished below 500. Obviously, he has had a track record of winning, to say the least, Calvin. Throughout his career, he's 128-60. That's including his time in Happy Valley and here in Nashville with Vanderbilt. He is 8-7 in bowl games. Calvin, just give me your initial thoughts when you heard the news that James Franklin is going to go to Virginia Tech and be a part of Enter Sandman. Obviously, he has I guess, a history of recruiting the DMV very well, considering his time at Penn State. So him being in that kind of Washington, DC area, that Maryland area, will do him a lot of good when it comes to recruiting. And there's already some kind of rumblings of flips and official visits to going the way of the Hokies.
Yeah, I thought that he would have another job before next season started. I didn't think he'd have another job less than a month after he got fired from one of the best programs in college football. If you would have asked me where I thought he would have landed, I don't think Virginia Tech would have been the answer. But I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense because I couldn't really see him at a place like Florida or LSU, even though he has coached in the SEC before at Vanderbilt. But, Virginia Tech, a couple of years ago had some good teams, but, has been kind of spiraling over the last couple of years. And James Franklin has won just about everywhere he's been. And, the resume precedes itself. So, obviously Virginia Tech is hoping that James Franklin can do the same for them and kind of get them back at the top of the ACC and especially with the new playoff format, maybe compete for a college football playoff berth.
Yeah, I think this, if you're looking at it from the Virginia Tech perspective, this is a home run hire for you. James Franklin, the knock hasn't been that he doesn't win games. The knock has been that he doesn't win the big games. But I think if you're Virginia or Tech right now, you'll take a 9-win season. You'll take a 10-win season. So I think this is a great hire for them, considering that he's going to bring in a great staff to surround himself. He knows how to recruit, once again, as I mentioned, that DMV area. And so he has the connections and the relationships. And, I I don't want to say I was surprised that Penn State let him go, considering that the stretch of games that they lost. But he's had a lot of success there once again, and just not being able to defeat Ohio State, not able to win the big game. But you think about it, Calvin. This team last year, talking about Penn State under James Franklin, was a quarter away or a game away, whatever vernacular you want to use, from going to the national championship game. and they would have played against Ohio State. Obviously, they lost to Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl down there in Miami Gardens, but I mean, they were on the doorstep of winning a national championship last year at Penn State with James Franklin there. And for him to get fired 6 games into his next season, that was kind of nuts to think about. But like I said, I think Virginia Tech, it's a great situation for them. I think the ACC is wide open. We don't know right now who the best team in the ACC is. Obviously, Clemson has taken a step back the last couple of years with Dabo Swinney. I think Georgia Tech, rather, with Brent Key, excuse me, has kind of elevated themselves. Obviously, Mario Cristobal down in Miami, they have a nice little budget to play with. But I think Virginia Tech, if they commit to James Franklin and get the right resources in there, they have an opportunity to vault themselves into the conversation year after year of being a competitor and competing to get to Charlotte for the ACC championship.
Yeah, uh, like you said, Virginia Tech will take an 8-9 win season right now. You know, Virginia Tech's not. It's not a program where you take the job and you're immediately expected to win like you are at a Penn State or an Ohio State or Florida or LSU. Um, so you know, you're right. The knock on James Franklin was always that he didn't win the big one. You know, you go to a place where you're not necessarily expected to win the big one. It kind of resets the standard, I would think. But you know, if James Franklin ends up having that success that he had at Penn State, you know, eventually you're going to start being expected to, you know, show up in those big games. And you know, like you said, he was a quarter away from totally flipping the narrative last year and playing the national championship game. I mean, now obviously you want to win the national championship game. I don't think they would have beat that Ohio State team, but you know, just getting there and playing the national championship game would have completely flipped the narrative around James Franklin, I think. And you know, it's an immediate improvement for Virginia Tech, and like you said, it's a home run hire for them.
Yeah, I guess the last point here is I wonder how many recruits that were originally committed to Franklin and his staff at Penn State that decommitted and that have not committed to other places will consider going to Virginia Tech. We'll see how that pans out. Obviously, here locally, Beach offensive lineman Jack Fuchs decommitted from Penn State and just recently committed to Northwestern. We'll see if he has any change of hearts now that James Franklin has landed somewhere. But we'll dive into more of this with David Teal as he joins us to kick off that second hour of the show at 3 o'clock to dive into all things Virginia Tech and the Hokies. And once again, Virginia, as they're in the midst of a race to try to get to Charlotte in the ACC championship game and secure a berth in the college football playoff. Coming up, though, after the first commercial break, friend of the show and OVC sports commentator Bob Belvin will join us to help us break down and preview the upcoming matchup this Saturday out in Cookeville as UT Martin and Tennessee Tech square off for the Big South and OVC football championship. So Bob Belvin coming up on your screens right after this, so stick with us.
Got closer. All new Sportsbook, the latest gaming machines, live horse racing, and more. The Mid Gaming Hall, Kentucky Downs.
Winning just got closer.
This holiday season, the largest lantern festival in the country returns to Nashville Zoo. Experience more than 1,000 all-new handcrafted lanterns, towering creatures, magical worlds, and a North Pole village. At the center of it all, the Smashville Ice Rink. Welcome back to Zoolumination at Nashville Zoo. Bigger, brighter, and better than ever.
Busy bee, yeah, busy bee. If you need
Hold on, y'all, hold on. I need to make a call. Hey, this is Brianna with Busy Bee. I'm giving you a call to let you know your technician is on his way.
833.
Guys, not yet. Not yet.
Busy Bee. Oh,
Now I'm
Busy
ready,
Bee.
guys.
Call 775-7833.
Custom Stone Handlers supplies over 600 distributors and suppliers with quality stone products. Along with Riverstone, we produce and distribute over 100 building, landscape, and other bulk products. Our goal is to provide quality products, service, and partnerships to ensure our customers' success. We firmly believe the measure of any person or company is how you treat other people and customers. Give them a call at 931-490-4990 or visit CustomStoneHandlers.com.
Welcome back into Top 5 Tuesday here on Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. I'm David Wilson. That is Calvin White. Joining us now is friend of the show and OVC sports commentator Bob Belvin, as he helps us to preview and break down the upcoming matchup this Saturday out in Putnam County and Cookeville as UT Martin and Tennessee Tech square off for the OVC and Big South Championship. Bob, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon to both of you. I'm used to seeing Calvin sitting up in the stands by himself, furiously taking notes. So it's good to see him in a different spot.
Yeah, he's looking good today. He's got the hair kind of wild and all over the place, so we might need to buy him a brush or a comb. But he's ready to go. He's ready for some basketball tonight.
It'll harm it.
Bob, let's jump right into it. We got a really good matchup this weekend on Saturday as UT Martin and head coach Jason Simpson make the trip out east to take on a really good Tennessee Tech team that suffered just its first loss of the season last week up in Lexington against Kentucky. Just your initial thoughts on the matchup and maybe some X factors and some matchups that you're looking forward to see that can maybe swing this game one way or another.
Hard to tell. I mean, just lay the stats side by side, and as they generally do this time of year, they kind of tighten up a little bit. You kind of realize, got a Tennessee Tech team. Just looked at it just to refresh my memory. 160 points in the first 3 games of the season alone, and so of course an NAIA opponent in there, but 2 FCS opponents in there as well, and then they've gotten really rolling. UT Martin is a story that they won 6 of their last 7. Still can't get that Lindenwood loss out of my head in terms of where this be. If you look to Saturday, they are taking care of business there. But again, 6 or 7 for them. Just a great matchup. You can kind of see this thing coming 3 or 4 weeks ago. UT Martin, in my opinion, had a tougher road to climb out of that hole of losing that conference game. And they really got beat up a lot in their preseason playing FBS team. So once they got rolling, the top 2 teams are right where they need to be, 1 and 2 heading into this one, and Cookeville at high noon on Saturday.
Bob, in season 2 of Bobby Wilder, even now in today's kind of landscape of college football, you're expected to win faster than you were before, especially with transfer portal and NIL and all that type of stuff. But even then, I feel like you don't see it a whole lot where programs are this successful this fast. What has kind of been the key to the quick success that Bobby Wilder's had at Tech?
Well, let's go back 3 years and let's look at the landscape. And you make a good point, Calvin, because look at the contrast and where this program was today to 3 years ago. And that's no knock on Dwayne Alexander, but it was nowhere where it needed to be. Now, keep in mind, since Bobby Wilder has been there, the athletic director has been fired. Wilder has received a lot of publicity and a lot of trade publications associated with the FCS about that word alignment that you're hearing a lot. So, and then Dr. Oldham, the president of the university, has gotten very much involved in it in a manner that he didn't before. And so you can kind of see this coming, Calvin. And then I think really in Tech's place, and they got 3 key offensive portal transfers. They got 3 key defensive portal transfers. And then the rest kind of fell into place. They've revamped this roster quite a bit. It just was not, just wasn't a top-notch FCS roster 3 years ago. I think that's the thing that he's done. Has there been some more money spent? There has been. But, if you guys spend any time with Bobby Wilder, he's I don't want to say salesman, although that would still be a positive to his name, but he gets it done, guys. He's very, very commanding. When he walks in the room, he gets that done. He demands the room. He's rallied some donors from outside of the plateau, outside of the Upper Cumberland, and they're just believing in it. Plus, a brand new stadium coming their way next year. So you're right. He got it done a whole lot quicker, but I think the 3-3 and just totally revamping the roster and that's, kind of got the myth out of, the academics at Tech are harder than elsewhere, and we can't overcome that when we recruit. I think he kind of took that to the side and said, hey, if you're going to make a push, we're going to get this done in football, kind of listen to me kind of guy. And so far, so good. He's been right on the spot.
Bob, you mentioned, I guess, the early part of the season for UT Martin. A rough start to their year. Obviously, losses to Oklahoma State, UTEP, and to Southern Illinois. And then you mentioned the loss to Lindenwood as well. Obviously, Jason Simpson has had a track record of having some really good teams and really good programs. How have they kind of used those lessons to kind of get some momentum here of late? And, has that kind of calloused them, per se, that they face some adversity, that they're ready to go for a big matchup this weekend, considering when you look at the contrast, Tennessee Tech has had all the success through the first 10 games of their year, lost to last week to Kentucky, fresh off a loss.
Sure. Yeah, so compare and contrast, if you will. I thought in Jace Bauer, the quarterback of UT Martin, I thought they got a quality transfer quarterback to come in. I joked with Jason Simpson at Media Day, and I held up a piece of paper and I said it just had Jace Bauer's name in the preseason. Didn't have any statistics, anything where he came from. So we didn't know a lot about him. They've revamped that offense, David, and they've gotten much more out of the running game than they had in seasons past. They got an NFL quarterback that played there 2 or 3 years ago, and he's throwing the ball all over the yard. So they revamped their offense a little bit. They got back to running the football, and that was a big part of it. And they got nicked up, as I kind of alluded to earlier. They got nicked up pretty good in the preseason with that FBS schedule. And boy, when you take a look at Oklahoma State and UTEP, of course, that's an old Scotty Walden matchup from his days at Austin Peay. And UTEP, when you look at those two programs and where they've gone since they played UT Martin, you kind of would like to play them again if you were Jason Simpson. But I mean, there's something. This is where coaching really comes in my opinion, because this is that there was no panic, and we also know the story about Jason Simpson's son and all the attention that's gotten there, and that never derailed Jason. That never got him out of kilter with his team. His team has always been the focus. I think a lot of people thought he would. Hey, I would as a parent. It would kind of feel natural to me to do that. But he changed that offense a little bit. They began to run the football more. And I think they looked around the rest of the conference, and their numbers are very good running the football, as does Tech. But, Kaskopis, their quarterback, gets a lot of attention. UT Martin's just not a bunch of names that jump off the page at you, but when you do that deep dive in the statistics, you see a lot of balance there, and he got comfortable doing that, and they just were unable to throw the football really well. I think particularly in the Southern Illinois game, when they figured that out and lost that one, and they just couldn't see where they had to throw the football a lot, and they settled down to a balanced attack, I think that's where they got a whole lot better.
Bob, Tech's offense, scores over 40 points a game, but it only gives up 17. I feel like a lot of times you don't see teams that are equally as dominant on both sides of the ball. You talked about their offense, but what's made them so good on defense where they can give up, what feels like a very, very low number of points.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll tell you what, if you take the Cumberland game out and take I forget what the other game is. They scored Western Illinois out, where they scored 66 on Western Illinois, and then you take the 42 they gave up at FBS Kentucky. When you take those numbers out, Calvin, they even get smaller. Each and every week, this team defensively, Tech, has had a player of the week or co-player of the week defensively, and it's been a lot of different players that have come up. They've scored 4 times this year in 4 separate games, a defensive touchdown. So, and again, and part of that, again, goes back to that 3-3 I was talking about, because, again, when Bobby Wilder took this program over, he had to revamp it totally, and he was able to, again, get that balance that he was looking for. But, again, pull those 3 scores out, and you can really see FCS on FCS, can really get a good feeling about how good this team has begun defensively.
Bob, obviously Tennessee Tech has a transfer at quarterback. Kind of give us some information about him. What makes him so good and so dynamic? Coming from the West Coast to the state of Tennessee.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably still, after all this time, guys, I should do better on my pronunciations.
That's why I left it for you. I left it on the table for you. I didn't want to try. I didn't want to whiff.
Let me make sure I get it. Let me make sure I get it right here. Hey, but the important thing, while I take a gander at this, the important thing is, how cool is it that your quarterback wears 0? I think
I like
that's
it,
really
Agent
cool.
Zero.
So hang on just a second. And yeah, he came from Eastern Washington, and again, it's Kekoa Vesperis, and that was the key. That's one of the first signees for Bobby Wilder after last season, was to go out and get Vesperis, and his numbers have been fantastic, as you might imagine. And one of the things, kind of one of those gems, if you will, in that he was redshirted the season. He had committed to a bigger school. He was one of the top 5 recruits. He had committed to the University of Washington. He was one of the top 5 recruits coming out of the state of Washington his senior season. And then he had a slight injury. They decided to redshirt him at Eastern Washington. And he was solid there, and he's adjusted so well. I know a lot of folks on that Tech campus that say he's really adjusted well from that West Coast lifestyle to, as y'all alluded to earlier, Putnam County, a little bit of different lifestyle there. And he's done exceptionally well. And again, a big reason, not totally the reason, but a very big reason why Tech is in the spot they're in.
Bob, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our team here in Clarksville, Austin Peay. They've got a big top 25 FCS matchup this week with Tarleton State. They're not going to win the conference per se, but with a win this week, I think they've got a chance to maybe sneak into the FCS playoffs. And outside of their win against Central Arkansas 2 weeks ago, every win they've had, they've just dominated whoever they've played. And
Yeah, but that Abilene Christian loss is really going to be the one that's going to really, really get after him, Calvin. Yeah, they were 24th in the FCS ratings this week, just barely getting back in there. Yeah, you're right. That loss was that loss. The way they played since that loss has been pretty spectacular. They're on the thinnest of margins. They really are. I can foresee. Help me, Calvin. It was the Will Healy year, the last Will Healy year, when they had the watch party and they didn't get in that year. That was really, really difficult on them. I think you're looking at one of those scenarios come Sunday. I really do. But they're in a winner-take-all game as well. Coming up this Saturday. They've got no choice but to win it in the same manner that UT Martin's got to win it. But boy, they sure have been exciting this year. It's just that loss right there, just at Abilene Christian, really, really took the wind out of their sails. And they were playing well leading into that. And Tarleton State's going to be a tough order for them on Saturday.
Bob Belvin joining us here on Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. Keep going, Calvin. I just want to throw him in there one more time.
Yeah. Bob, it feels like, sticking with Austin P, it feels like every week when we watch them, Chris Parson does something that we've never seen before, at least out of a quarterback at Austin P. He set the single season record for rushing touchdowns by a quarterback a couple weeks ago. I know at least 2 or 3 games that I've been at this year, he's accounted for 5 or 6 touchdowns. And we had Brian Reeves on the show about a month or two ago, I think before the season started, just to talk about Chris Parson. And he didn't want to compare him to other quarterbacks that he had seen. But, now that we have almost a full season's worth of sample size, not necessarily to rank him amongst the other guys, but in terms of just one of the more talented quarterbacks that Austin Peay's ever had, where would he kind of fall for you?
Top 5 easily, maybe top 3. Brian's a little bit shy because he's going to hedge on you going into the season, right? So I get the luxury of talking about it at the end of the season, right? Which makes it a whole lot easier. I think he's one of the top 3 ever. I think he's one of the top 3 recruits, transfers in that Austin Peay has ever had. And hey, let's just play this game. When you look at the 2 quarterbacks we talked about already, Jace Bauer and Kikoa Vesperis, and then you put Parson up there, I think Parson is the best of the 3 in terms of what he's brought to his team. And Austin Peay has needed him in a couple of different instances, particularly that NTSU game. I mean, he really took the game, and that clearly was a signature win. So yeah, I'm going to put him in the top 3 that were there. The other 2 that I'm thinking about right now don't have the run pass balance, I think, that Parson has.
Bob, you mentioned obviously in imparting the UTEP with Scotty Walden making the trip down there after being the head coach at Austin Peay. Jeff Ferris in his second season up in Clarksville. Just kind of talk about his growth and evolution from the first year to the second year and just his development as a coach, particularly at Austin Peay, knowing the area and the landscape of his team.
Hey, you know that great commercial, you feel comfortable in your own skin, right? Okay, so think about this. I think that's where Jeff Ferris is right now. Okay, so a couple of different things. West Coast guy, got Middle Tennessee ties, and that first year of acclimation after Walden departing, roster revamp, lots of different things have come into play there. Now he's dealing with an athletic director departure and possible change there. I think he's done a fantastic job. What he's done is I've seen, and Calvin's probably seen this too, I've seen him and his assistants out on the road a lot. And so they've got a lot of boots on the ground, recruiting freshmen, which, you can have your philosophy about that wherever you stand. But keep in mind, we've talked about 3 transfer quarterbacks in this discussion so far, portal quarterbacks. So he's determined that he's going to get those roots here in the Middle Tennessee. And I've known some folks told me he's got great roots in East Tennessee where he's been recruiting some too. So I think he's settled in. I think he's comfortable where the program is headed. I don't think by any means they've peaked at all. And what they've got opportunity-wise, both at the end of this season and next, appears to put them on pretty solid footing. Biggest challenge Austin Peay has, in my opinion, is the opponents they play are just not familiar anymore. And I'm not going to go back to the leaving the OVC thing. Forget that. I'm just saying it doesn't resonate with the local community. And one of the biggest challenges anybody at that university is going to have, it's my alma mater. 40-some years ago, I graduated there. But I can tell you is that this city is growing so much here in Clarksville that your marketing efforts and your appeal, man, they've got to be spot on because so many people don't know your brand and know about you, and you're challenged all the time with getting it out. And that will be the biggest challenge for that overall athletic program. But Jeff Ferris is their guy, no doubt, no doubt.
Bob, you probably saw, a Greg Jones-led defense last year at Tennessee Tech, and Now he's over here in his first year at Austin P, and it was it was noticeable from the very first game. But now that we have kind of with along the same lines as Chris Parson, now that we've had a full season's worth of it, how does a first year defensive coordinator come in? Obviously the roster was overhauled and there's better and more talented players on that defense, but how does a first year defensive coordinator come in and coordinate a defense that's played as well as Austin Peay's had this year?
I think you always have in your approach and in coaching, if you're going to make coaching a career, at the FCS level or looking above that, you always got to have good mentors. And I'm told he's got a lot of folks that have been giving him fantastic advice along the way. I'm talking schematically when it comes to positioning that. And I think, too, he has, to your point, he's got some really solid transfer players in there that are comfortable with his scheme. And you can see the difference. You could absolutely see the difference in the way they operate. So always have a mentor. We all have one of those, right? And again, just be able to feel at ease. And I'm told, I'm not that super close to the program, but I have a lot of people around it that I talk to weekly that I'm told that he's given a lot of levity with being able to run the kind of defenses as he wants. And again, in the end, it's players, no doubt. And I think they've got all of that. I think the future is really bright at Austin Peay with that combination of Green and Ferris.
Bob, one last thing before we let you go. We appreciate you taking some time on your Tuesday afternoon. Obviously, it was announced earlier this year, I guess several months ago, that Tennessee Tech would be leaving the OVC to join the SoCon. It was just kind of reported just the other day, yesterday, to be a fact, that Southeast Missouri State is staying or planning to stay in the OVC. Obviously, Arkansas Little Rock is planning to leave as well. Just kind of give us your thoughts on the nature of the OVC as it stands right now. Obviously, conference realignment, I guess, started a couple years ago with Power 4, with the Pac-12 kind of dissolving and, Oklahoma and Texas joining the SEC, and it's kind of trickled down to FCS schools as well. Just kind of give us your thoughts on the nature and the status of the OVC.
It's a tough sled. I had an opportunity to be for basketball media days, and I saw some of those huddle sessions that you alluded to, David, with the various athletic directors here and here and here. And one of the things you failed to mention is Beth DeBush retired a week after basketball media days. So all of those things combined, it is all about money. The answer is money. Now, what's the question kind of thing? It's crucial that SEMO, Southeast Missouri, remain in that conference as a hinge point between the Western schools, if you will, the Western Illinois to Lindenwoods, the schools in that direction, as well as those that are a little bit east of SEMO, and that would just be UT Martin in that case, Moorhead when you get back to basketball. So it's a complex situation. Very concerned about where the conference is going, and this year in football, it's been a really. I mean, you just take a look at the standings, and Tennessee Tech, UT Martin, 6 and 7 wins respectively. Everybody else, 4 and 3. So it's a dogfight at that level. It's just it's sad to see Tennessee Tech go. I might be the only guy that has children that have graduated from both UT Martin and Tennessee Tech. So my perspective is really different on this. Sad to see Tennessee Tech go. It was a good 75-year run for them. I think geographically aligned with where they are against the Southern Conference teams. I can see where that makes sense. I know a little bit about how that went down, and it didn't go down in those I don't want to say unprofessional ways, but it was difficult how the decision was brought forward to the conference office, probably within about 4 hours of lead time, and knowing that out of the blue kind of thing. So I will say that about it, but it's basketball, right? We got to make basketball good to get that guaranteed revenue from the tournament and your portion of that. And football is going to be an uphill struggle. The schools in it, the ones that play football, are solid academic institutions, and just kind of rally around that fact. And hopefully, I don't see any expansion on the horizon right now because, I mean, we're at a time of, federally of a lot of flux with schools. Federal dollars not being allocated, state dollars not being allocated. A lot of these projects are going on with private donor funding, which is a pull. It's a tug of war for any FCS school to raise money above and beyond to keep them supportive of their athletics. So it's going to be a tough sled. I think we got to, kind of gather ourselves and spend a year taking a deep breath and kind of assessing where you are and looking where your opportunities are. But it's tough when you're beyond P4, P5 conference. It's the money, and it's the toughest element. Always has been, and now is amplified.
Bob Belvin, you can follow him on X or Twitter at Bob Belvin Sports. Bob, we appreciate you taking some time. We're looking forward to this matchup on Saturday. We'll talk to you down the road.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'll finish my office when I get a chance. I can't be. They moved me right before football season, so I have one plaque on the wall. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you so much.
Appreciate you. Have a good one. Coming up on the show, we'll close the first hour talking a little baseball right after this, so stick with us.
Columbia Power and Water Systems is dedicated to bringing our customers reliable, local service. Whether you're turning on a light switch, your faucet, or streaming on TV, our dedicated team members from here in Murray County work every day to keep you on. If you need us, call us 931-388-4833 or visit cpws.com. CPWS, local service, local support.
Zion Christian Academy at zioneagles.org or 931-388-7531. You can schedule your appointment to visit their beautiful campus. Again, zioneagles.org or 931-7531 to schedule your visit today.
Nashville's Nutcracker, presented by Nashville Ballet, returns to TPAC November 29th through December 28th. This holiday season, audiences will journey with Clara and the Nutcracker Prince through Nashville's history and a land of sweets. Tickets on sale at NashvilleBallet.com.
Welcome back into Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. I'm David Wilson. That is Calvin White. Time to talk a little baseball as we close the first hour of the show. Calvin, it was recently announced, I believe last night, the ballot and the voting is now going to get underway for the Hall of Fame for 2026. We'll see who can get to Cooperstown. While I'm pulling this up really quickly, sorry about that, was not prepared. Some of the first-year candidates on the list include former Philadelphia Philly left-handed pitcher and Braves left-handed pitcher for one outing up in Baltimore, Cole Hamels, Ryan Braun, also on the list. Gio Gonzalez, Alex Scorton, Matt Kemp, Howie Kendrick, Nick Markakis, Daniel Murphy, Hunter Pence, Shin-Shu Chu, Edwin Encarnacion, and Rick Porcello highlight the first-year candidates on the list. Obviously, there's some holdovers from the last couple of years that are still looking to reach eligibility to reach the Hall of Fame. Bobby Abreu, Carlos Beltran, Mark Burley, Felix Hernandez, Torrey Hunter, Andrew Jones, Dustin Pedroia, Jimmy Rines, Francisco Rodriguez, Alex Rodriguez, Manny Ramirez, and Andy Pettit. Calvin, of the first-year guys on the list, once again, Ryan Braun, Cole Hamels, Nick Markakis, Howie Kendrick, Rick Porcello, Gio Gonzalez, Matt Kemp, Daniel Murphy, Hunter Pence, Edwin Encarnacion, and Sin-Chu Chu. Who kind of stands out to you as a guy that maybe, won't be a first ballot Hall of Famer per se, but eventually may reach some eligibility and get in there?
I don't think any of those guys get in.
I think that's a fair answer. Go ahead. Tell me why.
I mean, most of these guys that you read, like, you would never in a million years think of them as a Hall of Fame player. Like,
yeah,
what
I agree.
what has Hunter Pence ever done to make anybody think that he's a Hall of Fame player?
He's won some world championships. That's part of I guess that's part of the criteria. But keep going. My initial thought when I read that list of names, Cole Hamels, maybe. But
Yeah.
I believe only one World Series. I don't know how many Cy Youngs. I guess that would be a good point to look up. But let's see what his WAR is. I mean, you have to compare them to the pitchers of their era, too. So that matters as well. So we'll see. I will pound the table, and I know Maurice is like this as well. That Andrew Jones deserves to be a Hall of Famer. It's been far too long, at least in my eyes and in my opinion. Obviously, I'm looking through Braves colored glasses, but I think Andrew Jones is more than deserving. Obviously, over 400 home runs in his career, the Gold League for themselves. But when we're looking at these first year guys, Calvin, obviously, so I think has the best shot. He was a 4-time All-Star, had 163 wins in his career, a 3.43 ERA for Philadelphia from 2006 to 2015. Went on to pitch for Texas and the Cubs, and as I mentioned, a brief stint with the Braves for one outing. Threw a no-hitter on July 25th of 2015. Was MVP of the National League Championship Series in 2008, and also World Series champion. Other than that, Calvin, I don't know. Like when you look at Ryan Braun, he was the MVP in 2011, was a 6-time All-Star, had 352 home runs, but also had a 50-game suspension for testing positive for a banned substance in a urine sample. You think about Matt Kemp, a 3-time All-Star, but only had 287 home runs through his time. So we'll see. I guess it's important to note when it comes to the Hall of Fame ballot that Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, Don Mattingly, Dale Murphy are being considered among the contemporary era committee who will vote people in. Carlos Delgado, Jeff Kemp, Gary Sheffield, and Fernando Valenzuela as well. So I guess I have 2 Braves that I would like to see get in the Hall of Fame here within the next year, and that would be Andrew Jones and Dale Murphy, who Murph was a 2-time back-to-back MVP, and was kind of the face one his time, and then obviously Andrew, as I mentioned, the ability nobody could go get it in center field like Andrew Jones.
No, and I think if Ryan Braun would have stayed clean, I think Ryan Braun would have had. I'm not going to say surefire chance, but I think he would have had an outside chance to get in, later in his time on the ballot. I'm with you. It's well past time that Andrew Jones and Dale Murphy are Hall of Famers. And I think this, obviously, the writers don't have to vote for anybody on their ballot, but just based off the results from last year and how weak the ballot is, I would assume that this is the year Carlos Beltran gets in. I think the thing kind of hanging over him is the Astros sign stealing scandal, obviously. But Beltran, I think, is a Hall of Fame player. He got 70% of the vote last year, so I think this will finally be the year for Beltran. And then I do think that, well, I won't say for sure, but I think that now that they're off of the regular ballot and they're onto the contemporary ballot, I think Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens and all those guys will eventually find their way in.
With you on Beltran. Obviously, hopefully Andrew Jones can make the news that we did not Cooperstown. Some other day on the show, obviously, was jam-packed with Mo from this past weekend. One of the first dominoes to fall in free agency for the ML Schneider, who was traded from the Diamondbacks to the Mariners at the trade deadline this past July. He signed a 5-year contract with the Mariners to stay in the Pacific Northwest through the 2030 season. Josh Naylor batted .307 in 66 games, including the postseason with the Mariners in 2025, and he gets rewarded with a new deal. He was 28 years old. Between Arizona and Seattle, Naylor batted .295 with 81 runs scored, 20 homers, 92 RBIs, and 30 stolen bases. So a really nice season. And, the Mariners, add another left-handed bat in the lineup. That includes Cal Raleigh and Julio Rodriguez out that core.
Yeah, and that now that they've got him locked up, they've got a pretty good corner infield duo with him and Eugenio Suarez. If they can, keep that core together, and if Cal Raleigh continues to do what Cal Raleigh, obviously Cal Raleigh's not going to do what he did this year every year, but if Cal Raleigh can consistently be that dominant switch hitting catcher behind the plate, and you keep that pitching staff healthy, the Mariners, after 25 years of everybody kind of putting the Mariners to the side, the Mariners, might be here to stay in the American League for a while.
Obviously, we had another sign. We've on the board for 2 free agents so far as the qualifying offer period, I believe, is today, where those that were extended a qualifying offer has to make a decision whether or not they are accepting or rejecting the 1-year contract. The Yankees re-signed and reunited with pitcher Yarbrough on a 1-year, $2.5 million deal to add not only to their bullpen, but to their starting pitching as well. Yarbrough played both roles for them after release during the early part of spring training by another team. The Yankees are on the board as well, as they add some pitching depth to their organization as well. Obviously, the GM meetings were last week in Las Vegas. Alex Anthopoulos talked to some media personnel and kind of admitted that the Braves' offseason priorities are finding a shortstop, which we all knew, and also depth to some starting pitching and to the relief pitching as well. Obviously, they declined player options on Pierce Johnson and Tyler Kinley in that bullpen, so that bullpen is some arms added to it. Obviously, the dominoes are still yet to fall, Calvin. Kyle Tucker, Bo Bichette, Dylan Cease, Kyle Schwarber, Edwin Diaz, Framber Valdez. The list goes on and on. So we'll see what kind of pans out and who's going to be the first domino to fall as we get to the winter meetings.
Yeah. And I believe Alex Bregman's also a free agent. I think he declined his option with Boston. So, like you mentioned, a star-studded list of free agents this year. It's always fun this time of year to keep up with who goes where, and depending on what teams these players go to, it could shake up the whole landscape of Major League Baseball next year.
Coming up here on the show, it's the 3 o'clock hour. Friend of the show, the Virginia-Pilot, David Teel, will join us to help us break down the news of James Franklin becoming the next head coach of Virginia Tech. David Teel joining us next here on Main Street Sports Today, so stick with us.
Jones & Lang Sporting Goods here in Columbia has been outfitting teams, officials, and anybody else from T-ball to college for 50-plus years. Be sure and check them out at 931-388-8060 or online at jonesandlang.com. Jones & Lang Sporting Goods, the look of a winner.
Zion Christian Academy at zioneagles.org or 931-388-7531. You can schedule your appointment to visit their beautiful campus. Again, zioneagles.org or 931-7531 to schedule your visit today.
Is your internet slowing you down? It's time for an upgrade. Whether you're at home, working from your home office, or at your business, it's time to unleash the speed you need with speeds up to 1 gig at CPWS for as low as $70 a month. Give us a call, 931-375-7777. Local service, local support, CPWS.
Piggly Wiggly, located in Neely's Mill Shopping Center, is Columbia's locally owned and operated Cost Plus 10 grocery store dedicated to serving the community with low prices and smiling faces. Piggly Wiggly offers fresh, hand-cut meats daily as well as daily hot plate lunches from their deli counter. You're certain to see smiling faces and a helping hand when you're here at Piggly Wiggly. Come by and check out our fresh produce, high-quality meats, and more. Down home, down the street, we'll see you at the Pig.
Welcome back into Top 5 Tuesday here on Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. I'm David, that is Calvin White. Joining us now, up from the DMV, friend of the show, David TEEL from the Virginian-Pilot, joining us here to help us break down the latest news that James Franklin is going to be a part of Sandman and be the next head coach of the Virginia Tech Hokies. David, how we doing?
We're doing great, guys. How about you?
Good.
Doing well. Can't complain. Got some nice weather down here in Tennessee, so we'll take it as we inch closer to Thanksgiving in December. Obviously, David's big news for Virginia Tech with the ACC overall yesterday as James Franklin was announced as the next head coach at Virginia Tech. Kind of give us your initial thoughts on the move. It seems like a home run hire for the Hokies to get a coach who's won over 68% of his games, 128 wins in his career. To get to take over that program.
Yeah, guys, the remarkable thing is when Virginia Tech parted ways with Brent Pry on September 14th, Penn State and James Franklin were undefeated, number 2 in the country, and less than a year removed from the college football playoff semifinals where they almost knocked off Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl. So the thought of James Franklin being the next coach at Virginia Tech dawned on no one. It would have been a preposterous thought, unfathomable. But 3 Nittany Lions losses later, they move on. And to Virginia Tech's credit, their search team pivoted on a dime and said, holy smokes, we can't believe our good luck. This is a perfect storm. Let's go chase this guy and take a swing. And as these things often do when Jimmy Sexton is involved, it took some time and some negotiations, but they got it across the finish line. And yeah, it's big news in these parts and very large news for the Atlantic Coast Conference at large.
David, James Franklin has a history of recruiting that part of the country, that Virginia DMV area. When, obviously there's probably going to be some of those Penn State recruits that he had that are, potentially going to flip. And, with his history of recruiting that area, where do you think that, obviously we're a long ways away from a completed roster being put together, but just his ability to recruit that area and potentially bring some of those recruits, where do you think that kind of makes Virginia Tech fall in the landscape of the ACC next year?
Well, like you said, we're a long ways from roster compilation and roster completion, but I believe the number is 17 Penn State commits post Franklin dismissal have reopened their recruiting. And you would have to think that some of those, certainly not all, but some will be joining Coach Franklin in Blacksburg. But this is a roster that needs an overhaul and an influx of talent. And it's going to take more than a high school class to do that. He's going to have to hit the portal. He's going to have to do so aggressively and successfully. And I believe that Virginia Tech is committed to giving him the funds to do so.
David, can you kind of walk us through maybe the timeline of the process all came about and how eventually James Franklin became the head coach, and then what the timetable will be kind of moving forward when he assumes head coaching duties will be a part of the team, maybe the next couple weeks? What does that timetable look for him?
Well, I think he's hit the ground running already. I would imagine that he has a war room set up in the suite areas at Lane Stadium. He will almost certainly have, I would imagine dozens of recruits, prospects on campus this weekend for the Hokies home finale against Miami. And I also believe that over the next 2 weeks, he's going to be at practice. He's going to be evaluating the roster. What do I need? Do I need corners? Do I need safeties? Do I need offensive tackles? And I'm almost certain he will assemble a staff in rather short order and get to work. As for the timeline of his hiring, I think it started almost immediately after his College Game Day appearance, which came 4 or 5 days after his dismissal at Penn State. I guess it was 6 days because he was let go on a Sunday. And then the following Saturday, he was on the set with the game day crew, essentially, letting people know, I want to coach next year.
David, we wanted to talk to you about Virginia too. Obviously off this week, they're 9-2 right now. Play Virginia Tech next week. Are not, guaranteed a spot in the ACC championship game. But with depending on how things work out, what do you think, or how strong do you think Virginia's case is for the college football playoff this year?
Well, Virginia's going to have to win the ACC championship game. That's the Cavaliers' only path to the CFP. But in terms of getting there, if they beat Virginia Tech, they're almost certainly going to be in. There's one tiebreaker where it could get a little squirrely, but it would take some very bizarre results for the Cavaliers to beat Virginia Tech Thanksgiving weekend and then not make the ACC championship game. And there you would guess they would face either SMU or Georgia Tech. And heck, neither of those teams has been unbeatable. In fact, Georgia Tech should have lost to Wake Forest. If a referee drops the hanky, as he should have, on an offside call in the final minute there, Wake Forest can kneel that sucker out. And he did not, and Georgia Tech took advantage of the break and ends up winning in overtime. But, I would give the Cavaliers would probably be an underdog in that ACC championship game, but certainly have a puncher's chance.
David, just kind of sticking with the Cavaliers in Virginia, just kind of development of Tony Elliott as a head coach, obviously coming over from Clemson and spending time on the staff with Dabo Swinney. Maybe not the first couple seasons that he hoped for in his tenure, but they've really kind of turned around, as Calvin mentioned, this season. Just kind of talk about his development this year and getting that thing on the right track.
Resources, guys. Got to have them. got to have a payroll, right? And Virginia's donors and administration stepped up, and Tony Elliott and his staff took advantage of those resources and really hit the spring portal, especially quite hard, most notably on the offensive line and in the defensive secondary. And those acquisitions have paid massive dividends. And then they had a previous relationship with Chandler Morris, who was looking for another Power 4 chance. And Chandler's father, Chad Morris, had worked with Tony Elliott at Clemson under Dabo Swinney. And that was a very easy fit. And he came along, and he has been the best quarterback Virginia has had since Bryce Perkins in 2019, which also happens to be the only other time that the Cavaliers reach the ACC championship game.
David, next week, we're talking about that Virginia Tech matchup. It always feels like one of those games where you can kind of throw the records out the window, and the teams are having two totally different seasons. We talked about Virginia being really good. Virginia Tech obviously let go of their head coach early in the year, but just looking at it a week out, how do you see that one playing out?
Well, Virginia Tech has owned Virginia. Has won 20 of the last 22. And it's just a dominance that sticks in the craw of so many people around UVA and the institution itself and their fans and the athletic department. But Virginia is clearly, and I mean clearly, the superior team. And with all that could well be at stake next Saturday, week Saturday at Scott Stadium with the Cavaliers playing at home, I find it difficult to think that Virginia Tech's going to go in there and win.
David Teal over the Virginian-Pilot joining us here on Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. David, I would love to get your perspective on this. If you love chaos and you love drama, then the AC conference for you. It feels like week in and week out, we do not know who the best team in the ACC is. Is it Miami? Is it Louisville? Is it Virginia? Is it Georgia Tech? It seems like it changes week by week. Do you truly believe this is going to be just a one-bid league when it comes to the college football playoff? Or do you feel like there's an opportunity for the ACC to sneak at least two teams in there, with Miami probably being the one gaining the at-large bid?
Well, I would push back a little bit there because I think Georgia Tech could get into the at-large mix if the Jackets beat Georgia on Black Friday and beat Pitt this week, and would be 11-1 going to the ACC championship game. And I think the win over Georgia would lift the Yellow Jackets strongly into the at-large pool, were they then subsequently to lose the ACC championship game in a competitive contest, not in a blowout. So I think Georgia Tech, would have that chance. Miami obviously has to win its last two, and to have any kind of at-large chance. The Hurricanes' odds of making the ACC championship game are very slim, and they're going to have to rely on that season opening win over Notre Dame, and then the week 3, I believe it was, victory over South Florida. Maybe the Hurricanes could get into the at-large consideration, but in all likelihood, I think the odds say that the ACC will be a one-bid league.
David, Chandler Morris and Jamari Taylor have really been a good kind of 1-2 punch for Virginia's offense this year. Chandler Morris is a guy that, he's been around, been to a couple different schools, but has played really good for Virginia this year. What's kind of been the key to them being so successful this year and kind of powering that high-powered offense?
The offensive line, because that's been a source of so many ills for the program throughout Tony Elliott's tenure. And they finally got that not solved, but it's a pretty good group. And Jamari Taylor, as you mentioned, he comes from the FCS ranks, but he's been excellent. This past week he breaks that long 78-yard touchdown run to stick the dagger in Duke down in Durham. He had over 135 yards. He's been really good. Morris, he brings a component to the running game when he's healthy. He's had a dinged up shoulder of late, and as you saw in the Wake Forest contest, he had the concussion and had to miss the last 2.5 quarters because of that. But he was able to come back last week. But you're right, that's a pretty dynamic combination, and they've got some wideouts now. Trell Harris last week, 7 catches, I think $165, more than 70 of those yards after catch. He can make you miss, and when he does, he's gone.
David, as we kind of close with you here, and we appreciate you taking some time to join us, I want to hop back and talk about Virginia Tech and James Franklin. You mentioned how there's going to be some need for some roster overhaul, whether it's in the spring or the winter transfer portal window. But it's been proven, though, with this new kind of landscape of college football, build a roster very quickly and compete. Where do you kind of see the Hokies potentially being with a name like James Franklin at the helm, and just I guess the pecking order of the ACC? Obviously, he's going to be able to draw some recruits and do it well. So maybe talk about expectations within that program. What are they expecting from James Franklin, and maybe a win total that they would think? Obviously, he's shown that he can win at elite level. Once again, he's won 68% of his games as a head coach. So what is kind of the expectations on the table for him and what he can produce?
Guys, we're talking about a coach who won at Vanderbilt. Okay. But before James Franklin arrived at Vanderbilt, the Commodores had one top 25 season in their history, and that was in the 1940s. And he did it in back-to-back seasons. This is before the portal. This is before athlete compensation. What he did there is nothing short of miraculous. So you are absolutely right. He wins. And he did so during his 11-plus seasons at Penn State. I think expectations will be and should be quite high in Blacksburg. Certainly within 2 years, he should be contending for an ACC championship. And I would be surprised otherwise.
Appreciate you. David Till of Virginia-Pilot joining us here on Main Sports today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. No, it's hectic times up there. You've been big, so we appreciate you stopping by us a little insight.
Appreciate you all having me.
It's David Till joining us here on Main Street Sports today. Coming up after the commercial break, we'll dive into the latest edition of the Grab Bag as we talk some news and notes across the world of sports. So stay with us here.
This holiday season, the largest lantern festival in the country returns to Nashville Zoo. Experience more than 1,000 all-new handcrafted lanterns, towering creatures, magical worlds, and the North Pole Village. At the center of it all, the Smashville Ice Rink. Welcome back to Zoolumination at Nashville Zoo. Bigger, brighter, and better than ever.
Nashville's Nutcracker, presented by Nashville Ballet, returns to TPAC November 29th through December 28th. This holiday season, audiences will journey with Clara and the Nutcracker Prince through Nashville's history and the land of sweets. Tickets on sale at NashvilleBallet.com.
Jones & Lang Sporting Goods here in Columbia has been outfitting teams, officials, and anybody else from T-ball to college for 50-plus years. Be sure and check them out at 931-388-8060 or online at jonesandlang.com. Jones & Lang Sporting Goods, the look of a winner.
Piggly Wiggly, located in Neely's Mill Shopping Center, is Columbia's locally owned and operated Cost Plus 10 grocery store dedicated to serving the community with low prices and smiling faces. Piggly Wiggly offers fresh, hand-cut meats daily, as well as daily hot plate lunches from their deli counter. You're certain to see smiling faces and a helping hand when you're here at Piggly Wiggly. Come by and check out our fresh produce, high-quality meats, and more. Down home, down the street, we'll see you at the Pig.
Welcome back in to Top 5 Tuesday here on Main Street Sports today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. David Wilson, that is Calvin White. It's time to jump into the latest edition of the Grab Bag. Let's talk some news and notes across the world of sports. We'll start things off in the NFL. Last night, Monday Night Football in Sin City. It was Dallas Cowboys, Las Vegas Raiders last night. Final score 33-16 in favor of the Cowboys and quarterback Dak Prescott, who was absolutely phenomenal last night. 25 of 33 passing, 268 yards, and 4 touchdown throws. Was really connecting with George Pickens last night. I know you fantasy owners love that. George Pickens, 9 receptions for 144 yards and a touchdown. Dallas moves to 4-5-1 on its season, while the Las Vegas Raiders, under first-year head coach Pete Carroll, dropped to 2-8. And Calvin, we saw this, and I'm going to probably go in the opposite direction of what you thought and what maybe the audience would think as well. I'm not going to talk about the Cowboys. I'm going to talk about the Raiders. They've looked bad this year, Calvin. When you think about Pete Carroll, who is a coach that wins, we talked about with David Teal about James Franklin. He wins everywhere he goes. Pete Carroll's a winner. He won at USC. Created a dynasty there. He won in Seattle with the Legion of Boom and Russell Wilson. And so we thought kind of taking over down in Las Vegas. Obviously, he's one of the oldest coaches. It might be the oldest coach in the National Football League. We thought he could somewhat get that thing turned around. And they just haven't. Once again, their record is 2-8. He brings Chip Kelly over, who obviously spent some time in the NFL as the head coach with the Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, we know him from his time as the head coach at Oregon as well. Last year, he was the offensive coordinator for that juggernaut of an offense that was Ohio State, and he can't get it done at the offensive side of the football as well for the Raiders. They're 31st in the league in total offense. So maybe give me your thoughts on why things have gone wrong in Las Vegas and in Sin City.
Yeah, and he's kind of in the same boat as the Titans a little bit. He just doesn't have any good players. I think that his 2 best players are Brock Bowers and Max Crosby. And Max Crosby, as good as he is, it's hard to be that dominant defensive player when you're on the field as much as he is, because their offense is so bad. And Brock Bowers, his production doesn't happen without a good quarterback. And the Raiders just do not have a good quarterback. So they've kind of run into a little bit of roster problems like the Titans have, just in terms of not having any good players. But I also thought that, even with their roster deficiencies, that Pete Carroll would at least be able to elevate it a little bit, just because of how good of a coach he is, and his record kind of speaks for itself. But I just think it comes down to the Raiders don't have many good players to work with.
Yeah, I mean, this was a team last year that spent a top 10 draft pick on a running back, Ashton Genty from Boise State. And I don't think he has had, and maybe this is just me necessarily looking at, obviously, we do not get to watch a bunch of Raiders games living on the east side of the country compared to the west side. But he hasn't had this all-world season from the running back position where we consider him a top 5 running back in the game. Obviously, they traded away Jacoby Myers from that wide receiving corps to the Jaguars. So I get it. There might not be a lot of high-end talent there as well. They kind of settled with the quarterback position. That was a position that they had been struggling with the last couple of years of getting quality production from the quarterback position. I mean, we know it is a quarterback-driven league and it's a quarterback-driven sport. And, Geno Smith, I mean, he's a capable starting quarterback. He can start for you, but to expect him to lead you to playoff contention in the same division, when you look about their division, Calvin, you have the Chargers, who have John Harbaugh. Yeah, I was correct first time. Jim Harbaugh. Justin Herbert, a really good core there. You have obviously Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid and the Chiefs, and you have Sean Payton, Bo Nix, that vaunted Broncos defense, who are 9-2. I mean, you're competing against some really, really good teams, and you're going to have to be able to score points, and that's something that the Raiders just simply have not done.
Yeah, they don't have many good players. Their division's tough. Their schedule's tough. I mean, you mentioned it. Just looking at their division, they've got 2 of probably the top 6 or 7 quarterbacks in football, and Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes. And the Titans, saw that Broncos defense in the very first game of the season. That Denver defense has been good all year, and just playing at the bottom of your division every year, isn't much of a choice when you're playing against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, who've rattled off multiple Super Bowl wins over the last 4 or 5 years. Justin Herbert's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Jim Harbaugh, I think even though it's his first year back in the NFL, he's probably already a top 10 coach in the league just because of, the history he has coaching in the NFL, has coached in the Super Bowl. I think a lot of people predicted this would be a rough year for the Raiders. I just don't think they predicted it would be this rough.
Sticking in the world, we got some news from the AFC North. Obviously, on Sunday, when Dylan Gabriel, the starting quarterback for the Browns, goes down with a concussion in their 23rd loss to the Baltimore Ravens, which allowed Shedeur Sanders to come in as the backup quarterback and try to lead a game-time drive at the end of regulation. Dylan Gabriel is still in concussion protocol this week, and it is expected, according to CBS Sports, that Shedeur Sanders will make his first career NFL start this weekend as the Browns continue their season. Shedeur was 4 of 12 passing for 47 yards and an interception. It did not lead a scoring drive in that one. Obviously, the Ravens defense got to him a little bit. He was sacked by Kyle Hamilton on a big third down. He threw an interception that led to some points for Baltimore as well. So I think a lot of people and fans in Cleveland as well, with the lackluster season that they were having, were hoping that Shedeur Sanders could get and try to show what he can do. So he'll get that opportunity this week.
Yeah, he was the guy that everybody had their eye on during the draft, and he ended up falling so low that everybody was kind of questioning why he fell that low. And people in the media and people around the NFL have talked about the Browns quarterback situation ever since the offseason. And Joe Flacco obviously had his run at the start of the year, and before Dylan Gabriel took over, and now Shedeur Sanders is kind of gonna get his chance to prove why he shouldn't have fallen so low in the draft.
He'll get an opportunity this week as Cleveland continues its season versus the Raiders. Entertaining matchup. Hint word, you can hear the sarcasm in my voice. Might be a premium in that matchup. Staying in the AFC North, this is a matchup past weekend up in the Steel City between and the Cincinnati Bengals. We saw the kind of scuffle that broke loose between Jamar Chase and Jalen Ramsey that led to Jalen Ramsey getting ejected from the game. Well, after review by the NFL watching the video, Jamar Chase has been suspended for 1 game and $500,000 for spitting on Jalen Ramsey this past weekend, which led to his ejection and his unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. The Pittsburgh Steelers up the 35-12 win over the Bengals, who have really struggled this season, obviously with Joe Burrow being sidelined by his toe injury. But not a really good look, man. Calvin, to say the least. I think there's nothing more disrespectful to spit on another human being and spit on another man. So Jamar Chase is going to have to pay the punishment of that, both monetarily and with losing a game off.
Yeah, I just don't see a reason to ever spit on somebody. Most of the time it's not that serious. And I mean, you can argue about things if you want, but I mean, I just don't see a reason to ever spit on somebody, nonetheless, another grown man. But I guess Jamar Chase is going to serve his 1 game suspension and come back like nothing happened, I guess. But it's just one of those things that just there's never a good reason for it to happen. But unfortunately, stuff like this happens, and Jamar Chase and everybody else that takes part in that stuff has to deal with the consequences of it.
He does, and I get it. Like, it's a frustrating season for the Bengals, who offensively, when everybody's healthy, they are so talented offensively. They cannot figure out the defensive part of the game, to say the least. And I say that with all the love and the respect for Al Golden, who's their defensive coordinator, who spent last year Notre Dame's defense to the national championship. Left his job there to go take the DC job at in Cincinnati, who fired Lou Anarumo, who's now leading the Colts defense to a really great season. I don't know. It's just Cincinnati has to figure it out. I don't know if Zach Taylor is on his last leg there per se, but there's too much talent on that offense, to say the least, to be in the position continues to give them. So I can understand the frustration, but I'm not going to make an excuse for Jamar Chase in the sense of spitting on Jalen Ramsey. So we'll leave it at there. Jumping down to the college ranks, this Lane Kiffin saga, whether we're going to be Lane train, if he's staying in Oxford, Mississippi, or if he's moving to Baton Rouge. I think a lot of people are ready for that decision to be. It's been publicized over the last couple of days that his family around taking some trips. The rumor was that LSU sent a private jet to Oxford to court the Kiffin tour of Baton Rouge. Lane Kiffin went on the McAfee show today. The Ole Miss program. I mean, there was a report yesterday coming out from Yahoo Sports that an ultimatum was given to Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss administration, that he needs to make a decision prior to their potential run in the college football playoff, whether he's staying or going. Lane Kiffin disputed that and said that was completely untrue. Circulated around this week that's taking trips to not only Gainesville to map out the area and to see what it was like, but to Baton Rouge as well. So, I mean, Calvin, his name has been at the forefront of the coaching carousel for the last couple of years. Really, we heard it. Warren opened up a couple years ago with before Hugh Freeze took the job. We hear it now with LSU. We hear it now with Florida. It just seems like Lane Kiffin is always going to be one of those coaches until he leaves Ole Miss or makes a statement that he's not leaving. That's going to always be in the coaching carousel cycle.
Yeah, and this is the type of stuff that, even if he's not actually doing it right now, this is kind of what Lane Kiffin has been known for, all this like mystery and stuff around the decisions he makes. When you go back to when he left Tennessee for USC, kind of left, basically in the middle of the night to go coach USC. But I mean, what he's doing at Ole Miss right now is stuff that's never been done at that program before. And, if you want to leave for an LSU or a Florida, I don't think anybody would blame him necessarily. But, if you think about the history of Ole Miss football, if he keeps doing what he's doing, it looks like he's finally going to get his first crack at the college football playoff this year, unless everything just kind of falls apart. But if you consistently have Ole Miss in the college football playoff, I mean, they might build you a statue there someday. But I guess we'll just keep an eye on this the rest of the season, and going into the off season, whether Lane Kiffin decides to stay at Ole Miss or take another popular job in the SEC like an LSU or Florida.
Let's stay here, and Mark, you can continue to leave Lane Kiffin's beautiful picture on the screen for us as we divulge into this. Calvin, I guess this is a personal opinion, but how do you weigh that? Is the juice worth the squeeze, in a sense of, if Lane Kiffin stays at Ole Miss, it feels like he at this point has lifetime job security. They're not going to fire him. He has total control of the program. They're going to give him whatever he needs, and they've shown that they've done that. I mean, Ole Miss has gone shopping over the last several years in the transfer portal. I think some people would argue that last year's Ole Miss team is more talented than this year's Ole Miss team. They just stumbled in the Ghost, but you mentioned that they are squarely in the mix of the college football playoff. They only have one loss on the season, and that was to Georgia in between the hedges. If they take care of business next week in the Egg Bowl against Mississippi State, they are almost assuredly a lock to make the college football playoff. When you think about teams like Florida, who Ole Miss played last weekend in Oxford, and you think about LSU, let's first start with Florida. Do you not consider Ole Miss to be a better program and a better job right now than Florida? Or does the recruiting, I guess, implications and the aspirations of what it be outweigh Oxford, Mississippi?
I think it's a lot easier to win a national championship at Florida than it is at Ole Miss. I mean, if you just look at some of those teams Dan Mullen had at Florida, even Dan Mullen had really good teams at Florida, and that's not saying Dan Mullen's a bad coach, but I think if you have a good head coach in Gainesville and at LSU, those are two of the top 3 or 4 places if you want to count Alabama and Georgia, where if you've got a good head coach and you can get those recruits in there, it's a whole lot easier, I think, to win a national championship at those places than it is at Ole Miss. And, I think obviously people are drawn to Lane Kiffin. I think if Lane Kiffin did leave for LSU or Florida or anywhere else for that matter, I think that all those a lot of top recruits would be drawn to him, and it'd be a lot easier for Lane Kiffin to win at other places than it is at Ole Miss. Now, obviously, he's doing a really good job at Ole Miss. I just don't think it's as easy to win an SEC championship or a national championship at Ole Miss as it is compared to other stops in the SEC.
I understand that. I mean, I get it. When you come to Florida and you be the head coach in Gainesville, I mean, there's a saying you don't have to leave the state to recruit. I mean, Florida is a hotbed of college talent that has athletes there from the high school level that will play at the collegiate level. And Lane is the king, you could say, of the transfer portal as well. So I definitely believe that people would follow him there. There are also expectations that come with being at Florida that and LSU for that matter that are not at Ole Miss. I don't want to throw Ole Miss into the terms of Kentucky with Mark Stoops, but with Mark Stoops at Kentucky, they're happy if he only wins 8 games, 9 games. Ole Miss, they're not firing a coach who wins 8 or 9 games a year. And I know Lane Kiffin has bigger aspirations than that. Florida and LSU, they will fire you for worse. So we will see how that pans out. We'll see what decisions that Lane Kiffin makes when it comes to his future at the collegiate level, whether he remains in Oxford or ventures to another place potentially in the SEC. Moving on to the world of the NBA, a couple stars have exited over the last couple of days with big injuries that could potentially have them sidelined for weeks. We'll start in the Eastern Conference. We'll talk in the state of Wisconsin with Milwaukee Bucks star Giannis Antetokounmpo. He left last night's game against the Cleveland Cavaliers, which the Bucks lost 118-106 with a growing injury. He's set to get an MRI on it. And from what Doc Rivers said in the post game, it didn't look great. I can tell you that. We'll know more tomorrow, which would be today. He suffered the injury in the first quarter after he grabbed it with multiple times and then exited with about 3:30. Let me say this correctly. He started favoring his groin in the first quarter where he grabbed it multiple times. He exited the game for good with 3:03 remaining in the second quarter and was ruled out at halftime. He had scored 14 points on 6 of 10 shooting with 5 rebounds and 4 assists in the first 13 minutes. And after that, the Bucks were outscored 59-49, and they shot just 38% from the field after the half. So not a good sign. Obviously, Giannis is one of the faces of the NBA, one of the stars in the Eastern Conference. If the Bucks are going to miss him from any kind of time, that will not be good for Milwaukee.
No, and the NBA is a star-driven league, and you always want to have your stars on the floor when you talk about just stars that have been injured over the last couple of years. LeBron's hurt right now. Joel Embiid has his history of injuries. Kawhi Leonard, Paul George. You want your stars on the floor. The NBA is a very star-driven league, and Giannis is one of the best players in the history of the NBA. He's the best Milwaukee Buck ever. And And so, obviously, keeping him on the floor is key to their success. But, keeping him on the floor is good for the fans as well who tune in to watch him each and every game.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like each year though he continues to get better, Calvin. He's off to one of his best starts of his career this season. Although Milwaukee is just 8-7, Giannis has averaged 32.6 points a game, 11.3 rebounds, and 7.1 assists through the first 12. Obviously, there was some rumblings that he might want to get traded this past offseason, whether that was to New York or San Antonio or etc. Well, he stays put in Milwaukee, and he seems to be that mold. And the number of these guys is becoming fewer and fewer guys that play with one franchise for their entire career. But he seems like to be one of those. So hopefully Giannis will get healthy and healed up pretty soon and get back on the floor. Transitioning to the Western Conference with another budding superstar and potential face of the league, who also was off to a fantastic start to the season for my Spurs. Victor Wembanyama is set to miss a couple weeks with a calf strain after suffering the injury and the loss last weekend, or Friday night rather, to the Spurs win over the Kings on Sunday night. He is now expected to be out. Mulani of Wemby off to a potential MVP, defensive, and probably most improved player. He sweep all three. Start the year, averaging 26 points a game, 12.9 rebounds, 4 assists, 3.6 blocks, and 1.1 steals. He's shooting over 50% from the field, 35% from three, and 86% from the free throw line. More importantly, the Spurs had raced out to a 9-4 start after missing the playoffs last year. Like him and Luka were maybe already toe to toe for that potential MVP award, and the Spurs are really that's missed. De'Aaron Fox for part of the season as well. Not having Wemby and his size for the next couple weeks.
Yeah, and the Spurs have had some down years. After Tim Duncan retired, and Greg Popovich kind of got later in his coaching career. So, if the start to this season was any sign for the rest of the season for the Spurs, it looks like they've gotten better over the last couple of years. And, with Victor Wembanyama missing a couple weeks, that's going to leave him with not a lot of room to spare in terms of missing games if he wants to qualify for any of those major awards like MVP and Defensive Player of the Year since they put in the new 65 game rule.
I'm telling you, maybe I'm seeing rose-colored Spurs glasses as a fan, but that core is really talented. When you think about De'Aaron Fox at the point guard position, you think about Stephen Castle, you think about Dylan Harper, the number 2 overall pick from this past year's draft. You think about Wemby, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson. I mean, they have talent. You had Luke, who played at Vanderbilt Hill locally, coming off the bench as another big. I mean, look at Wemby's size in that photo. He's a man. He's an alien, and he's only going to get better as he grows. So hopefully Wemby can get back on the floor and stay healthy. I think there was with his size coming over from Europe, would he be able to stay healthy with the physicality of the NBA? So hopefully he can get his body better in shape and come back and be a key fixture once again for that Spurs attack. Last night in some college hoops, we mentioned earlier in the rundown, Tennessee moved to 4-0 on its season. They downed Rice at the Food City Center last night, 91-66. Felix Parra with 20 points and 8 rebounds, and Nate Emmett with 19 points and 10 rebounds with a double-double. Tennessee off to a nice 4-0 start under Rick Barnes. We got a good one tonight, Calvin, and a doubleheader on ESPN. First off, in the first matchup coming up here, 5:30 Central Time on ESPN, it's Michigan State taking on Kentucky in the State Farm Classic, and in the nightcap after the college football playoff rankings, which we'll get into in a minute, on 8 p.m. on ESPN, it's Bill Self and the Kansas Jayhawks taking on John Schneider and the Duke Blue Devils.
Yeah, Champions Classic is always a really good way to, kick off the season. Usually it's earlier in the season. But I think the Kentucky-Michigan State game will be really good. at least on paper, Tom Izzo's always got a really good team. And, Kentucky's going to be without their starting point guard for potentially the rest of the season. But, they've still got a really good roster with good players. I don't think the Duke-Kansas game will be close, only because, Kansas is going to be without Darren Peterson, who's projected to be the number one pick in the NBA draft. And really, Darren Peterson, through these first couple games to start the season, he's been the only real production that Kansas has had scoring-wise. And, Duke obviously has Cameron Boozer, who's just stuffed the stat sheet through the first 4 or 5 games of the year. Duke's got another team that looks Final Four good right now. And the Champions Classic between 4 of the most prolific programs in the history of college basketball is always a good way to kick off the start of the college basketball season.
Sandwiched in between is the third unveiling of the college football playoff rankings. You can find that on PN. Some things to look for tonight. How far does Alabama fall to their loss to Oklahoma in T-Town against the Sooners? How far does that gap between Notre Dame and Miami? All things to in tonight's unveiling of football playoff rankings as we get closer. Just a couple weeks left before Selection Sunday, and we get the official pairings of the college football playoff bracket. Coming up on the show as we round out the day on Top 5 Tuesday, we'll deliver our top 5 women's basketball players of all time. You can find out who Calvin and I have on our list coming up after this commercial break. So stay with us here on Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia.
The winning just got closer. All new Sportsbook, the latest gaming machines, live horse racing, and more. The Mid Gaming Hall, Kentucky Downs.
Winning just got closer.
Being in Tennessee, we wanted to try to keep it as local as possible, so we have an entire section of our menu that is just dedicated to local whiskeys like Uncle Nearest, Jack Daniels, of course, George Dickel, Nelson Brothers, Greenbrier whiskey, and all of our taps are all local. From 2 o'clock until midnight, we've got food every day for you guys. A good handful of appetizers, some entrees, and a couple salads and things like that. My name is Ethan Kanata. Please come down and see us at the Pick Lobby Bar here at the Omni in Nashville.
There's a line that links us all. Most of the time, we don't even think about it, but it's everywhere. Illuminating our neighborhoods, empowering our businesses, and helping us to recharge. Whether it comes from our grids, the sun, or a kind heart, we believe in the power of good energy. And as your family and region continue to grow, you can trust that we'll always be there for you. Middle Tennessee Electric, bringing good energy.
Welcome back into Main Street Sports Today, presented by the Tennessee Orthopedic Alliance of Columbia. On the top 5 today, I'm David Wilson. That is Calvin White. Before we get into our top 5 segment, some news we mentioned earlier in our MLB chatter segment. Today was the deadline for the MLB free agents to decide whether they were going to accept a qualifying offer or not, if they were extended one. Well, we have had several decline, and we also had several accept. Brandon Woodruff of the Milwaukee Brewers accepted the $250,000 deal, as well as Gleyber Torres of the Detroit Tigers, Shota Imanaga of the Chicago Cubs, and Trent Grisham of the New York Yankees. All those guys returning to their deal or their teams on a 1-year, $22 million deal. Zach Gallen, the pitcher for the Arizona Diamondbacks, declined his qualifying offer and will become a free agent. Without further ado, after that is in the bag, it's time for our top 5 segment here on a Tuesday as we discuss the top 5 women's basketball players of all time. Tired of buffering and slow internet speeds? Upgrade your life with Columbia Power and Water, CPWS Internet. Get lightning fast internet with speeds up to an incredible 1 gig. Stream, game, and work seamlessly, all for just $70 a month. If you're looking for local service and local support, visit cpws.com or call 931-375-7777. Once again, that is 931-375-7777. Tell them your friends at Main Street Sports Today sent you. Calvin, without further ado, it's time for our top 5 segment, top 5 women's basketball players of all time from the collegiate level. And I will give you, since you are the Tuesday expert, first pick.
Yeah, I went with Stewie, Brianna Stewart, at UConn, a 4-time national champion, 4-time tournament most outstanding player, was a 3-time national player of the year. She's, there's a lot of people who've got a good resume in college, but I think her resume, I mean, you literally cannot beat a 4-time national champion and 4-time tournament most outstanding player, and a 3-time national player of the year. I'll go Brianna Stewart.
I had her on my list. I will counter. My first pick would be Maya Moore, 154 rec time at UConn with Gino Auriemma, a 2-time national champion for NCAA history and a 3-time winner trophy, which was then best player in the game. So I will take Maya Moore from UConn, who went on to have a storied career links in the WNBA. Maya Moore, for me, is one of the top 5 basketball players of all time.
Yeah, I think that, with the 5 that I have, Maya Moore probably would have came in at number 6. I just don't think I could have put her over any of the ones I have. But at number 2, I put Caitlin Clark. She's the all-time leading scorer in the history of college basketball. 3-time Big Ten Player of the Year, 2-time National Player of the Year, 4-time All-American. I mean, the only thing missing from the resume is a national championship. But, just from how big her name is and how good she is, she's the all-time leading scorer. I don't think anybody's ever brought more eyes to the game than Caitlin Clark, so I'll put her in there at number 2 behind Stewie.
I like that. I will counter and I will stick with flavor on my list. You mentioned world-renowned players and players that send the game. I think Diana Taurasi will do that, particularly with her time at UConn and in the 3-time national champion with the Husky American, a 2-time most valuable player of the NCAA tournament. Obviously, he went on to have a great career in the WNBA as well. So Diana Taurasi, for me, definitely belongs on that 5 list of women's basketball players.
I also had Diana Taurasi at 3, and you mentioned all the career accolades that she had, but just to throw something in there to have just a little different wrinkle in our list, so we don't have some overlapping players. I do think Diana Taurasi is in the top 5, but Brittany Griner was somebody who was just outside the top 5 for me. 2 Wooden Awards in 4 seasons at Baylor, 3-time Big 12 Player of the Year, 4-time All-American. She was Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year all 4 years she was at Baylor. When she finished her career, she was 6th all-time on the NCAA scoring list. Just a dominant career at Baylor. So, even though I had Diana Taurasi in there at 3 with you, I'd throw in Brittany Griner in there just to have a little bit of a different wrinkle.
I have another one to my list. I'm going to go old school, and Mo was probably saying about dang time. I'm going to go back to 1980s, 86 to be going to the University of Southern Cal. I'm going Cheryl Miller. You want to talk about one of the best basketball players of all time that kind of paved the way for generations to come. I'll tip my hat to the queen, Cheryl Miller from USC, who her junior year had 26.8 points a game and 15.8 rebounds. Kind of talk about a gaudy stat line there for the Trojans. Cheryl Miller on my list.
Yeah, and I had Cheryl Miller here too, but I don't think that there's someone you can replace Cheryl Miller with. I think she definitely belongs in the top 5 here. Averaged over 20 points per game in all 4 years at USC. I think that when people think of dominant women's basketball players, I think Cheryl Miller is somebody that comes to mind pretty quickly. And, even though she doesn't have a lot of the exposure that a lot of the more recent women's players do, I think that Cheryl Miller's resume and story kind of speaks for itself when you talk about the best players in the history of women's basketball.
You're up next, my friend.
I went Cheryl Miller too. Would it not be back to you? I mean, I
I'm
can
sorry. I'm
go.
sorry. I didn't know that we. I thought no, it's fine. I thought when once we used somebody, they were done for good, and we could. I thought that segment. I'm sorry because I had
Oh, I
Caitlin
don't know.
Clark and Stewie on my list as well. But I'll throw in some different names. I mentioned there's going to be some Lady Ball love here. This is a player when I was just that grew up and watched on the TV screen with Pat Summitt. I can't live in the state of Tennessee and not say Candace Parker is one of the best women's basketball players of all time. Two-time Wooden Award winner, won the national championship. Her last 2 seasons up in Knoxville with Pat Summitt, an All-American in all of her 3 seasons for the Balls, was a national tournament most valuable player as well. Candace Parks players that transcended and was truly a star. She was dunking down the court. So I pay my homage to Candace Parker and the Lady Balls and to the late and the great and will always be missed Pat Summitt.
Yeah, Candace Parker was another one that just missed out on my top 5, but I'm gonna keep it with the Lady Vols and Pat Summitt. I'm gonna go with the Lady Vol that was a little bit before both of our time, but arguably the best female Tennessee Vol of all time. A little bit before our time, I'm gonna go Chamica Holtzclaw. Over 20 points per game her last 3 years at Tennessee. Nearly averaged a double-double all 3 of those final seasons as a Lady Vol. Won 2 straight Player of the Year awards. I think that when you talk about Lady Vols that kind of paved the way for people like Candace Parker and all those other really good Tennessee players, I think the conversation starts and ends with Chamica Holtzclaw.
And then I'll round things out. I mean, I think she's the best player in the WNBA right now. And I'm going to pay homage to the South Carolina Gamecocks, and I love me some Dawn Staley. Absolutely love Dawn Staley, and one of my favorite players to watch from the South Carolina in their heyday. Obviously, Asia, who just recently won an MVP in the WNBA and is now another, added another WNBA championship to her list with Becky Hammond, who spent some time with Pop on the bench with the Spurs. Asia Wilson was that girl, 2,389 career points, a consensus All-American 3 times. Was at the beginning of the South Carolina dynasty, SEC Player of the Year, 22.6 points per game and 3.2 blocks that year. She won Player of the Year. So Asia Wilson will round out my list. Also wanted to give a hat tip really quickly to Lynette Woodard from Kansas, 1978 to 81. Unofficially was the top scorer in women's basketball with 3,649 points before Caitlin Clark passed her final season up in Iowa. That'll do it. It was a nice Top 5 Tuesday here on Main Street Sports today, presented by the Tennessee Alliance of Columbia. We appreciate Bob Belvin, our OVC sports commentator, and David TEEL, the Virginia pilot, for joining us here today. We appreciate you guys. Hope you enjoy a little basketball tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow for a wild and wacky win.